Most people believe control looks obvious. They imagine it as power, authority, or someone forcing their will on others. But the most common form of control in everyday life is much quieter. It happens the moment someone can control your reaction. One sentence ruins your mood. One criticism lives in your mind the entire day. One disrespectful moment pulls you into anger, arguments, and restless thoughts. And without realizing it, your peace has already been taken. Not because the situation was powerful, but because the reaction was automatic. For most people, life becomes a chain of reactions. Reacting to what people say, reacting to how people behave, reacting to every small disturbance the world throws at them. Their mind moves like a leaf in the wind, pushed in every direction by the words, opinions, and moods of others. But Buddhist wisdom reveals something most people never learn. The moment you stop reacting blindly, your power returns. The same criticism may appear, but it no longer shakes you. The same provocation may happen, but your mind remains steady. The same people who once knew exactly how to disturb your peace suddenly lose their influence, because they were never controlling your life. They were only controlling your reactions. And the day you take back control of your reactions is the day your mind stops belonging to the world. It begins belonging to you. This is the quiet strength the Buddha pointed toward. Not the strength of fighting everyone, but the strength of becoming so calm, so aware, and so steady that nothing outside you can easily take your peace again. Reaction is the door through which others enter your mind. Imagine leaving your home completely open. The doors are unlocked. The windows are wide open. Anyone can walk inside whenever they want. Some people might enter quietly. Others might move things around. Some may bring noise, tension, or chaos into the room. After a while, the peaceful atmosphere of your home would slowly disappear. Most people would never allow that to happen. They protect their homes carefully. They choose who they invite inside. They close the door when someone brings negative energy. But when it comes to the mind, many people unknowingly do the opposite. They allow almost every word, opinion, and attitude from others to enter their thoughts. Someone makes a careless comment, and it stays in their mind the whole day. Someone criticizes them, and they keep replaying the sentence again and again. Someone speaks with a cold tone, and suddenly their mood begins to change. The mind starts carrying things that do not belong to it, and slowly, peace disappears. What is important to understand is that this is how influence begins. Most people do not control others with force. They control them through emotion. If someone learns that a certain type of comment makes you angry, they can use it again whenever they want to disturb you. If someone learns that you become defensive when criticized, they can keep pushing that button. If someone learns that you become insecure when ignored, they can shape your behavior just by changing their attention. In this way, reactions become a doorway. Through that doorway, other people gain access to your emotional world. But the moment awareness begins to grow, this pattern starts to change. You begin noticing something you never noticed before. You see how quickly certain words enter your mind. You see how easily certain tones change your mood. You see how much energy you spend thinking about things that should have passed in seconds. And slowly, you begin asking yourself a different question. Does every word deserve my attention? Does every opinion deserve space in my mind? Does every person deserve the power to change my inner state? The answer is often no. Some comments come from people who are frustrated with their own lives. Some judgments come from misunderstanding. Some criticisms come from projection, not truth. When you begin seeing this clearly, something inside you becomes wiser. You still hear what people say, but you stop carrying everything they throw toward you. You stop replaying every sentence in your mind. You stop allowing someone's bad mood to become your emotional burden. This is how the door of the mind slowly begins to close. Not because you stop caring about people, not because you become distant or cold, but because you become selective. You begin choosing what deserves a place in your mind and what should simply pass by. And something very beautiful happens when this shift occurs. Your thoughts become quieter. Your emotions become steadier. The outside world still speaks, but it no longer enters your inner space so easily. And the mind that protects its peace becomes calm. The calm mind does not react to every small disturbance. It does not absorb every careless word. It remains stable. And a stable mind becomes very difficult for anyone to control. The ego reacts quickly because it is always protecting an image. Deep inside the human mind, there is something that constantly wants to protect an image. This image is the idea we have about who we are. We want to be seen as intelligent. We want to be seen as capable. We want to be seen as respected and valued. Slowly, over the years, the mind builds this picture of itself. It creates a story that says, "This is who I am." And once that story is created, the ego begins guarding it very carefully. The problem is that this image is extremely sensitive. It feels threatened very easily. Someone disagrees with you, and suddenly the mind feels attacked. Someone questions your decision, and it feels like they are questioning your worth. Someone criticizes you, and it feels as if your entire identity has been challenged. In those moments, the reaction appears almost instantly. The voice becomes louder. The mind begins arguing. The heart starts beating faster. You feel a strong urge to defend yourself. You want to explain why you are right. You want to prove that the other person is wrong. You want to repair the image that feels damaged. But Buddhist wisdom teaches something very important. Much of this struggle comes from protecting an image that is not truly solid. It is only a mental construction. The person you believe yourself to be is made of memories, experiences, opinions, and labels. And all of these things are constantly changing. Yet the ego treats this image as if it must be defended at all costs. This is why people react so quickly. They are not only responding to the situation, they are protecting the story they have about themselves. If someone calls them lazy, the ego becomes angry. If someone doubts their intelligence, the ego rushes to prove itself. If someone misunderstands their intentions, the ego feels desperate to correct the narrative. But when someone begins to observe this carefully, a powerful realization appears. Not every opinion about you is true. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Not every criticism deserves your emotional energy. Sometimes, people speak from their own frustration. Sometimes they project their own fears. Sometimes, they simply do not understand your situation. And none of that truly changes who you are. The more someone sees this clearly, the lighter the mind becomes. They stop rushing to defend themselves every time someone speaks. They stop trying to control how everyone sees them. They stop exhausting themselves, protecting an image that can never fully satisfy everyone. Instead, they become comfortable with something much simpler. They know who they are, they know their intentions, and they no longer feel the need to prove it constantly. When this shift happens, reactions begin to slow down. The mind becomes less defensive. It becomes more peaceful, because the ego is no longer fighting every small battle to protect its fragile image. And the person who is no longer desperate to defend themselves becomes very difficult to provoke. Their calmness does not come from weakness. It comes from understanding. They know that their worth does not depend on every opinion they hear. And once the ego stops reacting to every small threat, the mind begins to experience a deeper kind of freedom. The pause is the beginning of inner freedom. Most people believe their reactions are natural and unavoidable. Something happens, and they immediately respond. A harsh word appears, and anger rises. Someone criticizes them, and they begin defending themselves. A frustrating situation happens, and irritation takes over the mind. Everything feels automatic. The event happens, the emotion appears, and the reaction follows instantly. Because this happens so quickly, most people believe they have no control over it. But Buddhist wisdom points to something very powerful that most people never notice. Between what happens and what you do, there is always a small space, a very small pause. It may only last a second, sometimes even less. But inside that tiny moment lies the beginning of inner freedom. When someone speaks harshly to you, the emotion may rise in your body. You may feel heat in your chest. You may feel tension in your thoughts. You may feel the urge to answer immediately. This is the moment where most people lose awareness. The mind jumps straight into reaction. Words are spoken quickly. The situation escalates. And afterward, many people regret what they said or did. But the person who begins observing their mind discovers something different. They start noticing the pause. They notice the moment where the emotion appears, but the reaction has not yet happened. In that moment, something important becomes possible. Instead of being carried away by the emotion, they observe it. They see the anger rising, but they do not immediately obey it. They feel the urge to defend themselves, but they remain still for a moment. This small pause changes everything, because the emotion may still exist, but it no longer controls the action. Instead of reacting automatically, the person begins choosing how to respond. They may decide that the situation is not worth their energy. They may decide to respond calmly instead of aggressively. They may even decide that silence is the wiser response. All of this becomes possible because of the pause. Without the pause, reactions are mechanical. They come from old habits, past conditioning, and emotional patterns that have been repeated for years. But when awareness enters the pause, those patterns begin to break. The person is no longer a prisoner of their impulses. They begin guiding their own behavior. At first, this pause may feel difficult. The mind is used to reacting quickly. It wants to defend, explain, and fight back. But the more someone practices awareness, the stronger this pause becomes. They begin catching the reaction earlier. The emotion rises, but it no longer controls them the same way. Over time, their responses become calmer. Their words become more thoughtful. Their mind becomes more stable. And something very beautiful begins to happen. Situations that once created emotional storms begin to lose their power. Because the mind is no longer reacting automatically. It is responding consciously. This is why Buddhist teachings place so much importance on awareness. Awareness creates the pause, and the pause creates freedom. The person who cannot pause before reacting will always be controlled by circumstances. But the person who learns to pause begins to step out of that control. Their peace no longer depends entirely on what happens around them. It begins to depend on how they choose to respond. And that is the beginning of true inner freedom. Silence often reveals more than reaction ever could. Very often, when people feel attacked or provoked, their first instinct is to react. They want to defend themselves. They want to correct the other person. They want to show that they will not be disrespected. So words come quickly. The voice becomes louder. The mind begins explaining, arguing, or pushing back. And in that moment, the entire situation becomes filled with noise. Emotions rise on both sides. The conversation becomes heated, and the original issue slowly disappears behind the storm of reactions. But something very different happens when a person learns the power of silence. When someone provokes you and you do not immediately react, the situation becomes clearer. Instead of adding more emotional energy, you simply remain still. You listen, you observe, you allow the moment to unfold without rushing to fill it with words. And suddenly something interesting begins to happen. The other person's behavior becomes more visible. Their tone stands alone. Their intention becomes easier to see. Their words reveal more about their state of mind. Without your reaction covering the situation, the truth of the moment becomes clearer. Sometimes, you begin to notice that the other person is not truly angry with you. They may be frustrated with their own life. They may be carrying stress that has nothing to do with you. They may simply be speaking from a place of insecurity or misunderstanding. But when you react immediately, none of this becomes visible. The moment becomes a battle instead of an observation. Silence, on the other hand, creates space. In that space, the energy of the situation begins to show itself. Many people expect resistance when they provoke someone. They expect anger. They expect argument. They expect emotional pushback. But when they meet silence instead, they often feel confused, because the reaction they were expecting never arrives. The emotional game they were preparing for suddenly disappears. Sometimes the other person begins to calm down on their own. Sometimes they realize how their words sounded. Sometimes they begin to reflect on what they just said. And all of this becomes possible simply because you did not add more noise to the moment. Silence also protects your mind. When you react immediately, emotions grow stronger. Anger feeds anger. Frustration feeds frustration. But when you stay quiet for a moment, the emotional storm often begins to lose its strength. Your mind stays clearer. Your thoughts remain calmer. You are able to understand the situation instead of becoming lost inside it. This does not mean that silence is always permanent. There are times when speaking is necessary. There are moments when clarity must be expressed and boundaries must be set. But when speech comes after silence, it becomes wiser. Your words become calmer. Your tone becomes steadier. Your message becomes clearer. Instead of reacting from emotion, you respond from awareness. And people often feel the difference immediately, because silence carries a quiet strength. It does not try to dominate the moment. It does not try to prove anything. It simply refuses to be pulled into unnecessary conflict. The person who reacts quickly often loses control of the situation. But the person who can remain silent for a moment keeps their clarity. They see more. They understand more. And because of that, they move through the situation with much greater wisdom. Detachment from opinions protects your inner stability. From a very young age, most people become deeply attached to how others see them. They want approval. They want to be liked. They want people to think well of them. When someone praises them, they feel uplifted. When someone criticizes them, they feel hurt. When someone misunderstands them, their mind becomes restless. Slowly, without realizing it, their emotional stability becomes tied to the opinions around them. If people approve of them, they feel confident. If people doubt them, they begin doubting themselves. But this creates a fragile kind of peace, because the opinions of the world are always changing. Someone may admire you today and criticize you tomorrow. Someone may respect your choices while another person completely misunderstands them. Different people see you through completely different lenses. Some judge through their personal experiences. Some judge through their own fears or insecurities. Some project their own struggles onto others without even realizing it. And because of this, the opinions people form about you are often more about their own mind than about your true nature. Yet many people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to control how they are seen. They try to please everyone. They try to explain themselves constantly. They try to fix every misunderstanding that appears. But this is an impossible task. No matter how carefully you live, someone will still misunderstand you. No matter how kind you are, someone will still criticize you. No matter how clearly you explain yourself, someone will still see you through their own limited perspective. Buddhist wisdom encourages a different way of relating to these opinions. It teaches detachment. Detachment does not mean ignoring everything people say. It means not allowing every opinion to define your inner state. You listen when someone speaks with wisdom. You reflect when criticism contains truth. But you stop treating every judgment as something that must disturb your peace, because you begin to understand something very important. Other people's opinions belong to their minds. They are shaped by their experiences, their beliefs, their expectations, and their personal struggles. They are not always an accurate reflection of who you are. Once this understanding becomes clear, the mind begins to relax. You no longer feel the need to correct every misunderstanding. You no longer feel desperate to win everyone's approval. You no longer feel wounded by every passing comment. Instead, your stability begins to come from a deeper place. You know your values. You know your intentions. You know the direction you are trying to walk in life. And that becomes enough. When praise comes, you accept it without becoming attached. When criticism appears, you examine it calmly without becoming defensive. Your peace no longer rises and falls with every opinion around you. It becomes steady. And the person who is no longer emotionally controlled by the opinions of others becomes far more stable inside. Their mind remains calm, even when judgments appear. Their direction remains clear, even when others doubt them. And this quiet independence is one of the most powerful forms of inner strength. Calmness creates distance from emotional chaos. In many situations, people get pulled into emotional chaos without even realizing how it happens. Someone speaks with anger, and the mind immediately responds with anger. Someone behaves unfairly, and frustration rises quickly. Someone says something hurtful, and the heart reacts with pain or defensiveness. Within seconds, the mind is completely inside the storm. Thoughts begin racing. Emotions grow stronger. Words start coming out faster than wisdom. In that moment, clarity disappears. Instead of seeing the situation clearly, the mind becomes part of the chaos. This is how emotional storms grow between people. One reaction fuels another. Anger meets anger. Frustration meets frustration. And before anyone realizes it, the situation has become far bigger than the original moment. But when someone learns to remain calm, something very different happens. Calmness creates distance. Instead of being pulled directly into the storm, the mind begins to observe it from the outside. You still hear the words. You still notice the tone. You still feel the emotion rising inside your body. But instead of becoming completely absorbed by it, you remain aware. It is as if you are standing slightly back from the situation. You see the emotion without immediately becoming it. This small distance changes the entire experience. When the mind is calm, thoughts become clearer. You begin noticing things you would normally miss. You may realize that the other person is reacting from stress, not from truth. You may notice that the situation is not as serious as it first appeared. You may see that responding emotionally will only make the moment worse. Because the mind is calm, wisdom has space to appear. But when the mind is trapped inside the emotional storm, wisdom has no room to speak. Everything becomes driven by impulse. Calmness also protects your energy. Emotional chaos is exhausting. Arguments, tension, and constant reactions drain the mind and body. Many people spend hours thinking about small conflicts long after they have happened. Their mind keeps replaying the situation. They imagine new responses. They relive the emotions again and again. But when calmness creates distance, the mind does not carry the situation for so long. It sees the moment, understands it, and lets it pass. This is one of the hidden strengths of inner stillness. It keeps your mind from becoming entangled in every emotional wave around you. The world will always contain tension and disagreement. People will sometimes act from anger, insecurity, or misunderstanding. That part of life cannot be fully avoided. But you do not have to become part of every storm you encounter. You can observe it without being swept away by it. And when people around you see that their emotional chaos does not pull you into the same reaction, something begins to shift. Sometimes the situation calms down. Sometimes the other person becomes aware of their own behavior. Sometimes the conflict simply fades away because it has no fuel to continue. This is why calmness is not weakness. It is clarity. The calm mind sees the situation from a higher place. It does not rush into the storm. It stands steady while the storm passes around it. And the person who can remain calm in the presence of chaos becomes very difficult for the world to disturb. Calm boundaries carry more power than emotional battles. Many people believe that strength means reacting loudly. They believe that if someone disrespects them, they must respond with anger. If someone challenges them, they must push back with equal force. If someone crosses a line, they must prove their power through emotional intensity. Because of this belief, many conflicts quickly turn into emotional battles. Voices rise. Words become sharp. Each person tries to dominate the moment. But when reactions become emotional battles, something important is lost. Clarity disappears. Instead of solving the situation, both sides become trapped inside their emotions. Anger begins to guide the conversation. Pride begins to defend every word. And the real issue often becomes buried under layers of tension. This is why Buddhist wisdom speaks about a different kind of strength. A strength that does not rely on emotional explosions. A strength that comes from calm clarity. When a person has calmness inside, they do not need to react loudly to show their dignity. They do not need to prove their worth through arguments. Instead, they set boundaries. A boundary simply means understanding what behavior you accept and what behavior you do not accept. It means knowing where your limits are. But the important part is how those boundaries are expressed. When someone reacts with anger, the message often becomes lost in the emotion. The other person stops listening. They focus only on the anger. But when a boundary is expressed calmly, the message becomes much clearer. The words are simple, the tone is steady, the intention is firm but not aggressive. For example, instead of shouting or attacking the other person, someone might calmly say that a certain behavior is not acceptable to them. They may choose to step away from the situation. They may choose to reduce their involvement with someone who repeatedly brings negativity. They do not create drama. They simply protect their peace. This kind of response carries quiet authority, because it does not come from wounded pride. It comes from self-respect, and people often feel the difference. When someone reacts with anger, others may push back with more anger. But when someone remains calm and firm, it becomes harder to continue the conflict. The calm person is not trying to dominate the moment. They are simply standing in their clarity. This is why calm boundaries are far more powerful than emotional battles. Emotional battles drain energy. They create more tension. They often lead to regret later. But calm boundaries protect both dignity and peace. They allow you to respond wisely instead of reacting impulsively. Over time, people begin to recognize this difference. They see that your calmness is not weakness. It is discipline. It is the ability to stay grounded even when emotions around you are intense. And the person who can remain calm while protecting their boundaries becomes very difficult to manipulate because they are not easily provoked. They are not easily pulled into drama. They stand quietly in their self-respect. And that quiet strength often carries far more power than the loudest argument. Mastering your mind is the highest form of freedom. Many people spend most of their lives trying to control the outside world. They try to control situations. They try to control how people treat them. They try to control how others think about them. They want everything around them to behave in a certain way so they can finally feel peaceful. If people respect them, they feel calm. If situations go according to their plans, they feel stable. If others agree with them, they feel secure. But life rarely works like this. People are unpredictable. Some will misunderstand you. Some will criticize you. Some will behave unfairly or speak carelessly. Situations will also change in ways you cannot control. Plans may fail. Expectations may break. Things may not happen when or how you hoped. When someone depends entirely on controlling the outside world in order to feel peaceful, their mind will constantly struggle, because the outside world is always changing. Trying to control every situation, every opinion, and every person is like trying to control the wind. It leads only to exhaustion. This is why Buddhist wisdom points toward a completely different path. Instead of trying to control everything outside, it teaches the mastery of the inner world. When you learn to understand your own mind, everything begins to shift. You start observing your thoughts instead of being ruled by them. You notice emotions rising without immediately becoming trapped inside them. You begin to see anger, fear, and frustration as temporary states passing through your awareness. This awareness creates space. The mind becomes less reactive. Instead of being pulled by every emotion, you begin guiding your responses with clarity. When the mind becomes steady, something powerful happens. The outside world loses much of its power over your inner peace. Harsh words may still appear, but they do not shake you the same way. Someone may misunderstand you, but it no longer disturbs your mind for hours. Difficult situations may arise, but they do not destroy your sense of balance. You begin to move through life with a quiet stability. This is not because life suddenly becomes easy. It is because your relationship with life has changed. Instead of reacting to everything around you, you respond with awareness. Instead of being controlled by circumstances, you remain grounded inside yourself. This is the kind of freedom Buddhist teachings point toward. Not the freedom of controlling others, not the freedom of escaping every difficulty, but the freedom of mastering your own mind. The person who has not mastered their mind is constantly pushed around by life. Their emotions rise and fall with every situation. Their peace disappears whenever something goes wrong. But the person who understands their mind begins to live differently. Their calmness does not depend entirely on circumstances. Their stability does not collapse when others behave badly. They remain steady even when the world around them is unpredictable. This is true inner freedom. It is quiet. It is not dramatic. But it is incredibly powerful. Because when you master your own mind, something remarkable happens. The world can still move, change, and challenge you, but it can no longer easily control how you feel inside. Your peace stops being something fragile that depends on everything going perfectly. It becomes something deeper, something stable, something that belongs to you. And that is the highest form of freedom a person can experience. There comes a moment in a person's life when they realize something that changes everything. The world may never stop testing you. People may still misunderstand you. Some may try to provoke you. Some may speak carelessly without thinking about the effect of their words. Situations will not always be fair. Life will still bring moments of tension, disappointment, and conflict. But the deepest shift happens when you stop allowing these things to control your inner world. You begin to see that every reaction you once gave away was a piece of your peace leaving your hands. Every argument you did not need. Every word that stayed in your mind long after it was spoken. Every moment where someone else's behavior decided your emotional state. All of it slowly disappears when awareness enters your life. The calm mind no longer rushes into every battle. It observes, it understands, and when necessary, it simply walks away. Because true strength is not the ability to win every argument. True strength is the ability to remain peaceful in a world that is often restless. When you stop reacting blindly, something very powerful happens. The people who once controlled your emotions lose their influence. The situations that once disturbed your peace lose their weight. And the mind that once felt pulled in every direction becomes steady and clear. This is the quiet power the Buddha spoke about. A mind that understands itself becomes unshakable. Not because the world becomes gentle, but because the mind is no longer easily moved. And when your peace no longer depends on how others behave, something rare appears in your life. Freedom. Not the freedom of escaping the world, but the freedom of walking through it with a mind that finally belongs to you. Most people don't realize how easily their mind is being controlled. Not by force, not by authority, but by simple reactions. Someone says one sentence, and your mood changes. Someone criticizes you, and your mind thinks about it all day. Someone disrespects you, and suddenly your peace disappears. And in that moment, something very important has already happened. They didn't control your life. They controlled your reaction. For most people, life becomes a chain of reactions. Reacting to opinions, reacting to anger, reacting to disrespect, reacting to every small disturbance that appears in the world. But Buddhist wisdom teaches something very powerful. The moment you stop reacting blindly, the world loses its grip on your mind. The same words will still be spoken. The same situations will still appear. But something inside you will no longer move the way it used to. Your mind becomes still. Your emotions become steady. And suddenly, the people who once knew exactly how to disturb your peace no longer know how to reach you. Because a person who has learned to master their reactions becomes very difficult to control. And the moment you understand this deeply, your life begins to change in a way most people never experience.